think of like a sports car with a big giant engine, okay? It can have, 600 horsepower. It can have just torque through the roof. But if the battery is disconnected, well, you're not going to be able to access any of it. So with MAT, what we're looking for is where in your body are your muscles metaphorically disconnected from their battery. And they can be as big and as powerful as they come, but if they're missing that connectivity piece, they're not going to be able to contract as well, and therefore their output is going to be diminished or lowered.
Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg in Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, we believe your health is your most valuable asset. Your health is one of the biggest influencers of the quality and quantity of time that you have. And while there are many aspects of health, our expertise is exercise. Exercise has been proven time and again to not only improve your health, but also increase your longevity and improve your quality of life. And if you are looking for a way to exercise on your own, from the comfort of your own home, while still receiving some guidance from myself and Julie, then you need to check out the MAS at-home workout program. This program is completely video guided, laid out for you over the course of 75 days, and it includes over 100 workouts that you can do totally at your convenience using minimal equipment and in under 20 minutes. It includes cardio workouts, resistance training workouts, mobility workshops, and even recovery days to make sure you stay feeling well and continue to exercise on a regular basis. So if this is of interest to you, to learn more and download your copy now, head to homeworkout.matschaumburg.com. Now today we're continuing the discussion that we had last week about ways to increase your strength without using more weight, because one of the issues with continuing to add more weight is if there is any compromised form going on, if there are aches and pains going on, things can be exacerbated, or you may be at a higher risk for injury. So we wanted to talk about things that you could do with your workouts that would help improve your strength without necessarily increasing the amount of weight that you're using. And today, we're continuing that discussion to add in one more aspect or one more thing that you can do to increase your strength without increasing the weights that you're using.
Charlie, I was just thinking of one to continue the commercial for last week's episode.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people are working out from home, and home usually means limited equipment, supplies, tools. And so last week's episode really talked about how you can keep working on your strength with those limited tools, especially if you don't have, weights from 1 pound to 200 pounds. So definitely check out that episode. And yes, today we are going to be talking about improving your strength with muscle activation techniques. And I'm excited to talk about this today because MAT, if you guys don't know, is one of the specialties that we do here at Muscle Activation Schaumburg. And if you are an avid podcast follower of us, you've heard us talk about it so many times. If you are brand new, welcome. We're about to talk about something you might have only heard about a little bit or might be brand new to you. And as many MAT specialists know, it is our honor and burden to have to not only be amazing at this skill of doing MAT, but also teaching people what it is. Because MAT, as we've said so many times in the past with our podcast, it's not common enough for people to really have a solid picture of what it is and what it's going to do for you. For example, when I say, you're going to go to the dentist and get a teeth cleaning, you have a pretty solid picture of what that's going to look like, what that's going to feel like, how long it's going to take, what the hygienist or the dentist might say. And so, you feel pretty comfortable and confident going to do that. But MAT is very different because usually we don't have a solid picture of what it's like. So I'm excited about today's podcast because we're going to hopefully shed some more light on that, especially if you're looking to increase your strength. And MAT actually this year is celebrating its 20-year anniversary. We just had our 20-year virtual summit, and it was just really cool hearing from the owner, Greg Roskoff, and the developer about how he just feels that it should be on every street in every corner of every town, which it is clearly not right now, just like chiropractors are or physical therapists are. Because the tool itself, it is so incredibly powerful, and so many of the stories that Charlie and I have witnessed and done with our own tool set has really been highlighted with all the specialists across the nation that were sharing their stories last night. So we're all jazzed up today because we just got to do that and just be reminded of the power of improving your strength with muscle activation techniques, because it is a different type of result than most people think of when you think of strength. And I hope we can touch on that a little bit today. But it also brings about the result that most people do think about when they think of strength. I think it's like a double-edged sword. But I think normally when we think about workout strength, we think about people that want to work out. But when we think about strength that you get from muscle activation techniques, it is such a larger spectrum of people with different interests, from the elite athletes to, people that are trying to relearn how to walk even. So this should hopefully be a cool topic for us to talk about today.
For sure. So I want to kick it off with, a story that a client told me about her experience post MAT. And it did have to go a little bit more in line with like what we traditionally consider to be like workout strength. So seeing, the weights that she was using actually go up, but they were feeling way easier. So, she came in and we were working to get her hip muscles, her leg muscles firing better. And, one session we ended up, working with her glutes to get her glutes firing better. And this is a pretty common thing that not only do we work through with MAT, but, a lot of people say, oh, my glutes aren't firing. So they do specific exercises. And this is something that she had been doing, specific glute firing exercises. But from an MAT perspective, they still weren't contracting as well as they could have been. So we got them working better with MAT. And about 2 days later, she sends me a text message and she says, I just want to let you know that the weights that I was using today for my squats went up 60 pounds from my last workout. 60 pounds.
I forgot about that story.
Yeah, it was incredible. And it wasn't like, her 1 rep max weight or anything. It was just the weight that she was able to do for like 10 reps. What she was, let's say she was doing 200 pounds before for 10 reps and she bumped up to 260 pounds. And, those type of gains you don't see after a couple days really in anybody. I mean, you don't see that in, high school age kids. You don't see that in college age kids. You don't see that in professional athletes with traditional training. But with the approach that MAT takes, you can see that rapid kind of improvement really, really rapid improvement really quickly. Again, that's one of my redundancies.
It makes it more dramatic.
Yeah,
Come on, it's good. It's good for the podcast.
So you can see that kind of improvement so quickly because of how MAT goes about addressing these deficits in strength or these inefficiencies in contraction.
Now, I'm not sure if all of our followers are that well versed in like changing weights, but just so you know, 60 pounds is a huge jump, especially if you've already been working out consistently. That's pretty unheard of.
I mean, usually you're thinking, okay, like I might go up 5 pounds. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's kind of the status quo of like, all right, I'm either going to stay the same or I'm going to go up 5 pounds between each workout. So to go up 60 pounds is just remarkable.
Now, I'm going to share a story. I was like, okay, well, if you're going to do that side, I'm going to do a story that we don't often think about as strength. But one of the things that's a sign of lack of strength in your muscle system is if you are having muscle symptoms. And a lot of the symptoms that Charlie and I see a lot are things like tightness, like quote unquote, I've pulled something. We also see a lot of like protective muscle mechanisms around bone things you have going on, whether that's like a bulging disc or a bone spur or arthritis. I'm struggling for words today, but you get what I'm saying. So these muscle compensations that happen around, and normally we think of those as like, oh, well, that's that's like an injury or like a diagnosed thing. I don't associate that with strength. So anyways, I remember I had this woman that wasn't interested in working out, but she was interested in her body feeling good. I mean, I don't know who doesn't want their body to feel good. So anyways, she had a pretty physical job. She was a flight attendant. So she was, constantly pushing the carts and holding trays and walking up and down aisles and having to keep her balance, all while looking graceful. You know how flight attendants do. By the way, I could never be a flight attendant because I have an intense fear of flying, and I would be like, oh my gosh, I have to stay buckled in the whole time. Anyways, so she was doing this, and that is very physically challenging. And I remember she had a pulled groin muscle for a long time. And a lot of times, again, we don't associate pulled muscles or really tight or achy muscles or joint limits or joint issues as muscle strength issues. But what's interesting is that after we worked on a lot of core muscles and a lot of knee muscles, because that's where her limits were, her groin had no issue. Like she's like, I thought I had an injured groin, but I'm not so sure anymore, because it was actually a lack of strength in other areas, and it was a lack of the efficiency of the contraction, which is what MAT addresses. It doesn't address like your inability to lift up a physical weight, but what it does is it allows the brain to connect with a muscle better. So we see stories like that all the time too, and it's so interesting because you're like, dang, I didn't think that was like caused by a lack of that muscle connectivity strength. I thought that was like an injury that I just have to give it time and it should go away on its own. So that's another type of situation that we see all the time with muscle activation techniques. And it's stories like that I really, really love, because, now she could do her job and play with her grandkids and do her travel. Like she's like, I traveled to Paris and then I don't want to walk around because my groin hurts, and I'm like, dang, you're in Paris. That's so cool. You should be doing, walking around, being a tourist. Anyways. But it's like stories like that allow people, like, give them their life back, because when you're physically impaired like that, whether it's a small pain or you've got a lot of them, it still is quite debilitating. So that's another thing that we see a whole bunch with MAT.
That is absolutely right. And I think two areas where I see it a lot with clients are in their feet and in their hands, because our feet, so often we spend so much time almost trying to like baby our feet, to try to get the muscles of our feet to not work. And look, almost 20% of your body's skeletal muscles are within your feet. So there's a huge number of muscles within your feet. But how often do we actually do foot exercises, right? How often do we actually try to strengthen those muscles? If anything, we do so much to try to get those muscles to not have to work as much. And especially when our feet are feeling symptomatic. But what's super interesting, to your point, Julie, is when we get people's feet working better, when we get their muscles functioning better, how much better the rest of their body feels and how much less stressed the rest of their body becomes, because now the strength of their feet has improved. So that's one thing that I see a lot. And then also with the hands, you'll have clients come in and say, I'm struggling to say like open a jar of pickles, or I'm struggling to open a bag of potato chips. I don't feel like it's either A, hurting my hands, or B, like I don't have the physical strength to do it. And by working through the forearms and the muscles of the hands and the fingers, not only does that improve, but they don't have that pain, that achiness in their hands and fingers anymore. So that part is pretty cool too. So yeah, I think those are two areas that I see it pretty frequently, that we often don't relate to like exercise strength or, weight room strength or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember just last year we were talking to our brother-in-law about foot strength, and we said to him, it's weird. Like, people just think they should wake up and their feet and hands should just be operating normal without doing anything. He's like, never thought of that, but you're right. I don't ever think that my feet shouldn't be operating normal, but he loves to work out. So he understands the rest of his body would lose strength if he wasn't strengthening them. Mm-hmm. So I love that you brought up those two areas, because those definitely oftentimes get categorized in that, this isn't like a strength muscle issue. This is an injury issue,
exactly.
or arthritis
aging
issues.
issue.
Yeah,
Yep.
just getting old.
Exactly. So how does MAT go about improving the strength? And Julie, you hit it on the head earlier. You talked about this idea of connectivity, okay? Making sure that your spinal cord is able to send sufficient amount of signal to your muscles. Your brain and your spinal cord are able to get a sufficient amount of signal to your muscles to tell your muscles to contract. And likewise, that your muscles can also get a sufficient amount of signal back to the brain and spinal cord saying, yeah, we're good to go. We're ready to contract. So there's this kind of loop, this communication system between the muscles and your central nervous system, your brain and your spinal cord. And when that gets disrupted, then your muscles start to lose the ability to contract. And the analogy that I like to use is, think of like a sports car with a big giant engine, okay? It can have, 600 horsepower, it can have just torque through the roof, but if the battery is disconnected, well, you're not going to be able to access any of it. And so with MAT, what we're looking for is where in your body are your muscles metaphorically disconnected from their battery. And they can be as big and as powerful as they come, but if they're missing that connectivity piece, they're not going to be able to contract as well, and therefore their output is going to be diminished or lowered. And so that's what we're looking for with MAT, is where do you have muscles that aren't contracting well because you have these metaphorical, as Greg Roscoff says, loose battery cables, or the battery is disconnected from your muscles, and they're not receiving sufficient input from your central nervous system telling them to contract.
Now, Charlie, I love that analogy. And I think a lot of times when we bring up like the sports car, we think of, oh, well, that must be like someone that's like big and buff. But, all cars of all ages, sizes, speeds, engine sizes, or horsepower, they all need appropriately connected battery cables. So
That is
maybe
true.
you are driving the Fiat, that's your muscles, you're slim, trim, small. You don't have all this horsepower like a power lifter, but if your battery cables aren't working well, then your muscles are not working well.
Mm-hmm.
And so what MAT does, it doesn't necessarily build the size of your muscle or build muscle fibers or, their cross bridges, which is what we normally think of when we think of like strength in the gym or strength, lifting stuff. But what it does do is it makes sure that your brain is able to talk to and communicate to to as many muscles as, whatever muscle we're testing or we're looking at. And the problem is that when there is lack of communication, our bodies do something called compensate. So what MAT is trying to do is lessen your compensation. Let's see if we can get you to compensate less, give you access to more. And the beautiful thing about this is that we get these really cool strength changes really quickly, unlike when you're in the gym. I know Charlie shared this crazy story of one of his clients that increased 60 pounds, but usually 60 pounds of lifting, if you don't remember the story, but usually when you want to increase your weights in the gym, you have to return so many times, right? You never think like, oh, I could go to the gym and lift 5 pounds today and never have to lift that 5 pounds again, because I'll always keep the strength changes, right? And then to improve on that, I have to go a whole bunch of times, and then maybe eventually I'll get to the 8s, and then maybe eventually I'll get to the 10s. The cool thing with MAT is that if your body is capable of lifting the 10s, but for some reason you're feeling off, or you're at your 5s, then once the battery cables are connected, or your brain is talking to those muscles more, your body will be able to access that 10-pound ability almost. So what we're looking to do is optimize what you currently have. And when you do that, what happens is that then you're able to train harder if you're wanting to train, physically in the gym, or you're able to do more stuff in your daily life with less of those aches and pains. MAT, just like everything else in the world, is never like one magic pill that you do once and you never have to return to it. I know we all are looking for that thing, but it is a way to maintenance your muscles. Now, before we jump to the next way that MAT can help improve your strength, I did want to bring up something that everyone always asks us as the follow-up question. So I'm just going to go ahead and pretend you just asked it out loud because you might have in your car or gardening or however you listen to us. But is how do muscles then get disrupted from this communication? And the answer is pretty easy, but it actually can be like spiderwebbed into a whole bunch of different ways. So we like to say it in 3 simple words. Well, Greg Roscoff likes to sum it up as overuse, misuse, or disuse. So let's break that down. Overuse is something that you're using way too much. So we see this a lot with people that work out a whole bunch and maybe they're not working out in a way that's respectful to their body. We also see this in a lot of people that do a lot of repetitive stuff. So let's say you bend over a whole bunch of times and you're not like keeping that balanced in the other way. So that's a lot of overuse in that motion, even though you might not think like, oh, I'm not lifting 50 pounds. Well, you're still doing that motion over and over again. So an area that gets overused. The next one is misused. So this might be area that gets injured. That would be like misuse of an area, right? So like if you roll your ankle, like that ankle just went beyond its normal range of motion, that would be misuse. Also, if you're not working out very well in the gym, meaning like you're kind of harassing your body as you exercise, your body's getting worse as you exercise, that would be an example of misuse. In addition, if you have a whole bunch of compensation and you're just moving around normal, you're probably misusing some stuff because it's having to get some things are getting really overused, some things are getting really underused. And then the one we probably see the most, and this one we label usually as quote unquote, I'm just getting old, is underuse. So the one that's...
Or disuse.
Or disuse. Yeah, underuse or disuse. I'm sorry. So disuse means you're not using it, right? A lot of people, again, think that for forever in time, I should be able to wake up out of bed, my muscles should be able to turn on, ready to go, my body should feel good. And we always hear this as, well, why does my back hurt? I didn't do anything. Well, that's a big issue. You're not strengthening your back. That means it's getting weaker. I think there's like some random age out there that's thrown out, like 35 or something, that at the age of 35, if you're not doing something to improve your muscles, they are getting worse. Everyone's age is clearly different. I don't know how they discovered 35, but at some age, you start losing muscle function, losing muscle health, and losing the muscle's ability to do their job, which is contract, if you are not maintaining them and working on it. So if you come into an MAT specialist and you say, I have no idea why my knee's bothering me, I didn't do anything, that's the problem. You didn't do anything. And to keep our muscles and joints healthy, you have to be doing something. So to answer your question that you asked out loud or in your head, well, how did my battery cables get disconnected in the first place? Again, it's going to be the overuse stuff, the misuse or injuries, and then the disuse or the underuse. So especially for those of you that do not regularly weight train, you will get a lot of those aches and pains arriving and loss of strength because of underuse.
Julia, that's so important for everybody to understand, because the whole idea of MAT is to try to figure out where you have muscles that aren't contracting well and then get those muscles working better. And so if we can also understand how those muscles get to not contract well in the first place, then we can also be proactive along the way of, all right, what do I need to do to make sure my muscles stay working well in addition to doing MAT? So thank you for that segment, because that was really important for everybody to understand. Now, the second way that MAT can help improve your strength is not only will it improve like the primary muscles that would be involved in, a motion or an exercise, but it works on all of the secondary muscles, all what we might call the stabilizer muscles, however, the supporting muscles, however you want to call it. It's not just like the big prime mover, superstar muscles that we're looking at. If we're thinking of like glutes and quads and hamstring and everything like that, it's all the little individual, super tiny intrinsic muscles as well, MAT has the ability to assess and address, which is drastically different than, say, doing, a lunge or doing a squat, where your body is going to default to using all the muscles that are already working well and bypassing the muscles that are not going to be super useful at helping you perform the squat or helping you perform the lunge. And with MAT, we're saying, wait a second, no. All of those muscles are important. Every single muscle, all 276 muscles on each side of your body is really important. So 552 muscles overall is really important. And we need to make sure that the strength and the contractibility of each of those muscles, the contractile efficiency of all those muscles, is as good as it can be. And so by going through each of those muscles, and not that we need to go through every single one by one, but we will get a lot more specific with the work. And therefore, we're able to address a number of muscles that are often overlooked from a traditional exercise and a traditional rehabilitative perspective.
Now, I was trying to think of, I got to think of a really good example of this while you're talking, and I think I thought of one. Have you guys ever, at least I think it's a good example. Have you guys ever heard of piriformis syndrome? It is actually a syndrome that gets like a lot of press. And if you don't know about it, you'll probably hear about it one day. Anyways, so piriformis syndrome, the name is actually a muscle. So if you're not aware, piriformis is a muscle. And again, it is a very famous muscle. And usually when you have this piriformis syndrome, it means that you're like, oh my gosh, that means I need to get my piriformis work done. And oftentimes when you go to traditional therapy or you're doing rehab exercise or corrective exercise in the gym, you are working on that piriformis like it's your full-time job. What's interesting with muscle activation techniques, because of the in-depth nature that we go into, if piriformis is the only one that's worked on, you're going to be in bad shape, because there are a lot of supporting muscles that are like the sister friends of piriformis, and that are really, really, really good at doing the same job as piriformis. I never want to say they do the exact same job, but oftentimes when we say like supporting muscles or secondary muscles, we kind of think they're kind of like distant cousins, but actually they're like congenital twins. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say twins. They just don't actually have the same name. So some weird names of muscles that we often will work on with piriformis would be something like obturator externus. I know you've never heard of that muscle, but that one's really important for us to work on. Or gemellus superior and inferior. You never heard of that one either, but that one's really, really good at helping piriformis. And I could go through a whole list just like that. And then we could have multiple lists of all the other different motions, like your tight hamstrings or your low back issue or your, whatever, cross pelvis, whatever thing you have going on. No matter what symptoms you have going on, we're going to look at that area and go super in depth, because it is more about the name that gets the fame, that muscle that is famous. It is about making sure that that muscle also has all of his twins and best buddies working with him. And again, those best buddies aren't like these distant friends that are like, even living far away. They like live in the same area. They're doing the same function. And so it is so important that we not only are addressing the muscle that does get all the famous names and gets all the press, but that all the sister friends are getting help too.
That's awesome. The image of the congenital twins, the Siamese twins, that's pretty hilarious, because I often think of the cats, I should say, from Lady and the Tramp.
They're doing the same stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
They look the same.
Exactly. Yeah. So, that's a great analogy there. I love that.
And actually, Charlie, if you think about it, even us, so Charlie and I, we get work done every week, so we experience a lot of MAT. But how many times have you thought like, oh, this is definitely my pyramidalis or my rectus or whatever muscle, and then we work on something else that we see that's like being indicated that needs to get worked, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe it wasn't the one I thought, but the one that the MAT process indicates we should work on. Well, now I don't have that symptom that makes me think it was that issue.
Exactly.
So it is really the full in-depth area is so important to address, not just the muscle that you might think is having the issue.
For sure. So if you're listening to this episode and you're thinking, okay, yeah, it sounds like I should be doing some MAT, or I would like to be, increasing my strength without necessarily trying to use more weights at the gym. So MAT is something I should do. Well, then do this. Go to muscleactivation.com and click on the Find a Specialist tabs, because there you'll see a list of all the certified practitioners worldwide, and you'll be able to find one in your area and connect directly with them. So if this is piquing your interest in MAT, be sure to go to muscleactivation.com and again, click on the Find a Specialist tab to find one in your area.
Also, if you're in our area, you can just call us.
Yeah, if you're in the Chicagoland area, we would love to work with you for sure. So yeah, you head to matschaumburg.com and you can book an appointment right there with us, or send us an email, info@matschaumburg.com.
And also, Charlie is an instructor with the MAT community, and the community is very tight-knit. We all go to Denver to get education. So if you're ever in need of a specialist, you're not really sure how to navigate finding one, you can always reach out to us, and we can see if we have a referral for you in your area.
For sure. To go along with that, like if you are looking for a way to combine some exercise with your MAT, but you're not wanting to go to a gym right now, then what you need to do is go to homeworkout.matschaumburg.com, because there we have created a step-by-step 75-day workout program. And you can do it over the course of 150 days. You can do it over the course of however many days. But if you're trying to work out every single day, you can get through the whole program in 75 days. That's how much content there is. Not only that, there's over 100 workouts included, from resistance training to cardio to mobility workshops and recovery days, to make sure you stay feeling well and you are able to continue to exercise on a consistent basis.
And if you listen to this and you're like, yeah, but I'm like on the side of the spectrum where I don't really want to work out, I just want my body to feel good. Well, then you would probably really love the mobility workshops that we did in the home workout program. And every single person that participated in our mobility workshop that we got feedback from said how unique it was. So definitely check it out. It is not like your typical like stretching class. It is all based around muscle activation techniques. So definitely check that out. You would get that in the program. So the mobility workshops would be right up your alley.
For sure. And while you're online, head on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.